The division, absent any interesting trade exceptions, continues to roll on with the Charlotte Hornets. Key free agents, Miles Bridges is restricted. Cody Martin, an important free agent for them, he's also restricted. They have early bird rights on Montrezl Harrell. Kelly Oubre Jr., $5 million of his $12.6 million salary is guaranteed until June 30th. That I expect them to guarantee it. Mason Plumlee has basically half of his $9 million salary guaranteed until 10 days before the moratorium, which, unless my math is off, it should be guaranteed as we're recording this, or just already guaranteed.
They guaranteed it.
They did. Okay. I apologize for messing that up. I didn't see it. Jalen McDaniels has a $1.9 million team option, and Nick Richards has a $1.8 million non-guaranteed till the last day of the moratorium. Notable extension candidates: Gordon Hayward in parentheticals, LOL, PJ Washington, and Jalen McDaniels. No notable trade exceptions, as I sort of alluded to at the top. Their best spending tool is the non-taxpayer MLE. I don't even know if I'd be skeptical to use all of it, because they're about $20 million away from the tax if you just factor in Bridges' cap hold. And his cap hold is sub 17. And my guess is he probably winds up closer to 25 than 17. So their best spending tool might be the minimum. I don't know that Michael Jordan is going to spend anything that brings them into the tax. Still, I don't mean to troll them. It's just I do mean to troll them. This is not a shot at Hornets fans, but the report, the way Windhorst framed it, that they need to move Gordon Hayward to afford to re-sign Miles Bridges, that's not actually how restricted free agency works, just in case anyone was wondering. Grant, I guess the starting point is Miles Bridges, like his restricted free agency. Do you expect there to be a market for him? Do you expect him back in Charlotte? Is there a scenario where you don't see him there? Yada, yada, yada.
Yeah, I think the fact that we haven't really mentioned him a ton as a target for other teams would suggest that like maybe his market isn't fantastic, but that speaks more to the lack of cap space around the league and which teams have it, I think, than anything else. Because he's not necessarily a PC1 as a rebuilder. He's young enough, but I think he's good right now. So, and you're paying for basically his prime. So I don't know if that which way that cuts. I think so. Mitch Kupchak came out today as we were recording and said that they're going to bring him back. Speaking of Bridges, but obviously didn't say
that would be disastrous if they don't.
Well, yeah, you can't just let him leave. I mean, like, this is a cheapo organization. It's not trolling. It's just like, it's a fact. So if any team were going to do it, it might be them, but they have to bring him back. I don't know what form that's going to take. I don't know. Like, I don't think I'm comfortable at the full max, but that may be what it takes. I'm not going, I could see 4 years. I could see, you could even like do the Gordon Hayward thing with the Jazz from years ago and not offer him the full term and just sort of see how it goes. Turned out it didn't go well for Utah, but or did it, since Hayward just basically kept getting hurt after that. I don't know. In terms of big picture needs, like we can talk about Bridges too, but this team just needs a defensive center. If you can stretch, that's great. And otherwise, like, you're just trying to fill in a roster that makes sense for a Steve Clifford team now, which I'm sure the mandate is like, we have to defend, we have to make the playoffs. So that frames kind of what you're going for.
Right. And so, yeah, I'm pretty much with you on Miles Bridges. I don't think he'll get a max offer sheet, but like the teams with cap space, like if it's Orlando, if it's Detroit or San Antonio, and they decide to fuck around and go 100, the Hornets have to match along those lines. Or maybe they try and screw Charlotte by making it shorter term. Michael Jordan might appreciate the shorter term deal, though. Clutch Sports is involved, so anything is on the table. And I won't rule out like just being surprised by how much he gets. They still need a defensive center, and yet they have Kai Jones, now Mark Williams, and then Mason Plumlee is there. I'm not saying they're the answers, but it's ideally you're moving Mason Plumlee as part of a deal for any center. Miles Turner is the one that's been mentioned a ton. I think the Kelly Oubre Jr. for Rashawn Holmes swap makes a lot of sense for both sides. Or maybe it makes less if you have Harrison Barnes and Keegan Murray in Sacramento. I wouldn't like, you have Sabonis, and they've been linked to Looney, and they, for some reason, were trying to trade for John Collins. Please don't even, I can't explain that one. So there are bigs out there they could get. And Rashawn Holmes might not be enough of a defensive anchor, but he's underrated there. And just under Steve Clifford, I think that he would be more than fine. Are there any center targets like in free agency that you've thought about, knowing full well that like predicting what Charlotte might be willing to spend, even though they can technically maybe access the full or the bigger mid-level, like good luck, like predicting actually use it.
That's the trick. I mean, the two I like a lot. I mean, Kevon Looney, I think I don't think he's going to leave the Warriors, but someone like that makes sense if it doesn't cost you the full MLE. Hartenstein, again, the fact that the Clippers can only offer him basically up to that number suggests that I think he'll at least get that offer elsewhere, and the Hornets could go a little bit above that if they have the stomach for it. But yeah, I think you're looking at that weird little middle ground of like Claxton. I don't think is realistic because I think the Nets will just kind of match or exceed what the Hornets are willing to pay.
But I wouldn't be. Joe Tsai seems fed up with how much that team is costing him. So.
Yeah, well, he should be fed up with a lot of things. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have any other centers you like?
I would love to see Mitchell Robinson under Steve Clifford, but I think it's been made pretty clear the Knicks are going to pay him, and the mid-level is not going to get him out of New York. Mo Bamba makes a lot of sense. He's also like a different look from the Mark Williams, Kai Jones, definitely a different look from Mason Plumlee. Does the mid-level type money get him? If we're, it's the Hornets. So like, I'm not trying to be an asshole here, but we have to think even sort of lower on the totem pole. Dwayne Dedmon. Do they even look at what is Serge Ibaka's market this summer? If they're just looking for a veteran, maybe even a Robin Lopez, not going to space the floor. I don't like, he's so slower paced, but Mason Plumlee's not exactly like this fast pace monger. Do they look at Tristan Thompson? Do they look at Moses Brown? Jalen Smith, I don't know how much he costs, but he could be fairly interesting. A lot of people consider him more of a 4, but he would really stretch the floor and give their ball handlers room to operate. I think their stomach for spending the MLE is going to depend on whether they can offload Gordon Hayward for a smaller salary or a combination of salaries that give them more breathing room under the tax after paying Miles Bridges.
I'm really annoyed that you got to Jalen Smith before I did.
I forgot that I'll refrain from mentioning him for any of the other teams so that you can be sure to flip him in.
Get him on to the next 3.
This team also needs to worry about re-signing Cody Martin. He's important. Like if they want to do something defensively, especially, like he's going to be important to that. And they just need wings. So like they need to be involved on what does Daniel House cost? Gary Harris is probably a little bit too small when you look at the setup of their roster, but what does Gary Harris cost? Is this this probably skews too far offense, but like what is Victor Oladipo going to end up costing them? What does TJ Warren cost? Amir Coffey, definitely a name that they should look at. They could bring in, like, if this is a team that wants to compete, a Wesley Matthews at age 35 shouldn't be off the table. Even when does Joe Ingles, when is he projected to come back? Do you take a flyer on him if it's for just slightly more than the minimum and he wants Steve Clifford's prepared to use him? They need to look at all those types of guys. They are available few and far between, but like this team isn't, you look at their wing depth and they just don't actually have it, especially if they're not married to the idea of keeping Gordon Hayward. Miles Bridges isn't a wing. Kelly Oubre Jr. is he's a wing, but is he's more in the Harrison Barnes ilk where he's kind of like not a wing, but he's better at defending them. So that's what I would be looking at if I'm Charlotte.
Yeah, it's a tough position to be in where 2 of your more likely trade candidates come from, which are Hayward and Kelly Oubre, come from a position where you really can't afford to lose much depth. But that's where they are, especially if you want to get a center. The Oubre for Holmes trade, probably with the Kings throwing in something, I think makes just a ton of sense.
And shout out to, I know they ended up getting the Denver's 2023 lottery protected pick and 4 seconds for the pick that became Jalen Duren. Shout out to Jake G. We had this conversation on Twitter. I was lampooning the Hornets and the Knicks when that deal happened until the full details came out. I think they probably made out fine there because maybe this opens playing time for James Bouknight and Kai Jones by going that route. I don't know if it does, but that's some. By the way, they could consider maybe we play Kai Jones this year. Maybe James Bouknight gives us something, and that addresses maybe some of their needs. Mm-hmm. Anything else on this team?
That's all I got on Charlotte.